Boundaries. Are they a Western concept or do they make sense in our Indian cultural context? That's a weighty question. Let me ask you another. What would happen if in a big bowl I took coconut water, sunflower oil, ice cream, and buttermilk? Sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? Now, instead, if you have a vessel with smaller containers to hold each of these, the liquids will not just hold their qualities, they'll also be more usable. Translate same concept to our families. And if our strengths are used together well, we do well. But there's value in appreciating that we're all unique, and boundaries allow us to have structure so that we're not operating either in an enmeshed or codependent or in some other way dysfunctional manner. And therefore, my opinion is they're not unsanskari, quite the opposite. In fact, let's look at the simplest example of a boundary that we actually value, say in, outside of your house. What does that do? It reinforces to everybody what's yours, what's not yours, right? Personal boundaries are the same. A very clear demarcation to anybody that interacts with you to see what's okay, what's not okay for the structures that house you. For the rest of this conversation, I'm going to heavily reference from Terry Cole, who's written a book called Boundary Boss. Boundaries, like everything else, will change, revise, different people, different groups, different life stages, and that's normal. So, what kind of boundaries are we talking about? It could be physical boundaries, which is who am I okay to nod at from a distance, or wave at, or shake hands with, or hug. What is my sense of physical space with somebody else? The second is material boundaries. What do you do with your things? So, for example, I have a reasonably flexible boundary with everything that I own, but my Tintin and Asterix comics collections don't leave my house. So, your boundaries don't need to make sense to anybody else, they don't need explanation, they just are. Then you have mental boundaries, for example, which are about your values and beliefs. Say, I am talking to a family member and I say, I want to leave this job, right? And they say, but there's a great brand, there'll be value to your career, don't leave. So they might be operating from a place of concern for you, but they try to go past a no that you've articulated and try to change your mind. Next, you have emotional boundaries, which are, lines to feel responsible for our own emotions and making sure others are not made to feel responsible for how we're feeling. You shouldn't feel that way is an emotional boundary violation, right? Now, I'm sure that as soon as we start talking about boundaries, you also think of the multiple times when boundaries are being crossed without a second thought. Entire family members whose love language is body shaming, right? So they'll see you at a wedding and they'll open with, "Oh, you've gained weight," and Schadenfreude is writ large on their face, and you're trying to stop seething and try to come back with "I also made vice president at 31" or something, but then can't do that. So outwardly you're making like a grimacing face and hope the conversation stops. But no, they're warming up. They were like, "Oh, you also look darker than when I last met you at that place." And in your head, you're like, "We're all shades of brown." But outwardly, again, you're like, yeah. So you can't challenge every gossipy relative and say you're crossing a boundary. Now, the situation is as individual as each of us. So you need to decide what boundary violations do you need to respond to and in what manner, and that is steeped in your reality. But a great start is to say, hey, this is a boundary violation, so it's on them, and you don't have to operate from a position of feeling diminished in any way, say feeling shameful about the comment that they might have made about you. So that's a great start already, even if you're not doing anything outwardly about that boundary situation. So what do you do to start setting better boundaries? Start with what is called a resentment inventory. So identify triggers where you were upset, where you felt underappreciated. It could be people, it could be situations, patterns. Now start to look at why am I feeling, angry or underappreciated. And also ask, what am I doing to contribute to that situation, right? Is my silence complicit, or am I pretending to be somebody that I'm not, etc. Often, and the reason I'm talking about is our boundaries are sometimes porous. We operate from a place of, if I don't do this, then I'm considered either a bad person or I have a low sense of self worth about it. So, to stop feeling weirder, quite often we don't say anything. And so, on the topic of boundaries, proceed slowly, proceed with help, ideally from a competent therapist. Now that we started to talk about boundaries, there are two things you can do. Start noticing when somebody crosses a boundary, and then start looking at how do you want to respond. Communicating your boundaries is a lot of work, and it's long term work. So you need to do this for a while before you start to see great results. So there are 4 C's for great boundary setting. First, clarity. Be clear about what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. The second is consistency. Enforce your boundaries regularly so others know that you mean what you say. The third one is communication. So making sure you're talking about your boundaries with others openly and respectfully before it comes to a impasse situation. And finally, consequences. Let them know what will happen if your boundaries are crossed, right? In addition, use concepts from earlier conversations that we've had. Fighting well, thinking about, is an apology relevant in this situation, or gratitude, and how do I do this in the most respectful possible way. I can go on about boundaries, but I won't. It's your turn now to be boundaryless in your exploration of your relationship with boundaries.